Alright, so we are dealing with our cycle 3, which is analyzing graphic informational text. I have everybody's data as entered into the file in the Dropbox. My numbers were interesting. I didn't have anybody proficient, which is bad, but I only had 3 interventions, so everybody's right there in the middle. I think everybody can move up. Were y'all seeing the same type stuff? What about your numbers?
I actually had a goodly number in the proficient range, right at 40%. So it was a good day in Mooneyham's room.
And again, I only had 1 student in proficient, but as you were saying, I only had 1 intervention student as well, so my students are pretty much right there in the middle.
Right, right. It is interesting that overall only 11% of all of our students were intervention. So that's a pretty good number to work with it, moving up. So let's start with step 2. Step 2 is identifying the strengths and performance errors within the students. And I know that y'all have kind of been giving this some thought beforehand so that we can look at these. Hal, you want to start us off with proficiency since you have that largest group?
Yeah, a good number. And there was a couple trends I saw. One is that they were better able to determine symbolic meanings in the graphic features. When I had them look at the pictures and political cartoons, they were able to see that this stands for that. So they made that connection a good bit better than the others.
So symbolism. Jen, what did you see in your one proficient student?
Basically the same things that Hal was saying. She was struggling with just the constructed response. And again, I only have 1 student, so I'm only speaking about her, but she was struggling just spelling out the constructed response. I think that she had all of the ideas here. I could follow her thinking, but it wasn't that 3.
Okay.
It was still 2.
And one other thing I wanted to note is that mine seemed to be able to make the connections to the real world a little bit easier. They were able to do that text-to-world connection thing that we have them do.
All right, so Hal, based on that text-to-world connection, what inference can you make?
Well, just thinking about the symbols and relating them to the real world, they were able to think abstractly about it.
Okay.
They were able to say, this equals that in the real world and transfer it over.
All right. So what are our next steps with the proficient or higher?
I think we could move them up on Blooms, and I think they would most benefit from creating a political cartoon. Where, I mean, they seem to be understanding graphic features and understanding political cartoons, but understanding and creating are 2 totally different things, and I think it would give them a chance to be creative, but also show their thinking and take it to that next level.
Good, good.
Yeah, if they can create and explain what they're doing, I think it's going to really help them out.
Very good. And I think that's our inference there, is by understanding that creation process, the students will analyze more deeply because they'll really understand what the artist is getting at. All right, close to proficient. I took a close look at these, and their strengths as a whole, they do well comparing information in the graphic with information from their background knowledge. I feel like they do tap into their background knowledge really well. Because of that, I think we've done a good job. My inference there is that we have done well in showing them the text-to-text, text-to-world, text-to-self connections.
Especially the text-to-self.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
I noticed that as well with mine.
What about performance errors and misconceptions? Anything? Obviously something.
Well, my proficient kids were doing well with the symbolism. These guys didn't do so well. They were having a little bit of trouble interpreting the symbols and relating them to the real world.
Do you think that's lack of experience?
Yeah, and I think it's also just trying to get that answer so quick. They're not going in depth on the analysis as fast as they, or as deeply as they could. They're trying to spit out that right answer a little too fast.
Okay.
It's almost like they see the obvious signs of it, but they're not, again, not taking it to that next step.
Right. I have that down as a weakness, that they'll struggle with getting beyond the obvious answer. So my inference would be that they struggle to think outside the box, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about far to go but likely? We all had a good chunk of those as well.
As far as the students who are far to go, when I was looking at the specific ones, let me get them out here. Sorry. As far as the students who are far to go, I noticed that they all got pretty much number 5 and number 8 right.
Okay.
It was some differing in, you know, the other ones, but it was very consistent that they got number 5 and number 8 right. And number 5 asked them to compare picture 1 versus picture 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they just really did a good job of being able to compare 2 different graphic features.
I noticed that same thing with my Fartigo.
Mm-hmm.
So their strengths were in comparing.
Mm-hmm.
At least
And if you look at number 8, the answer says the size of the door compared to the size of the children suggests the segregation was an obstacle even after Brown versus Board of Education.
Right.
And again, it's that comparison. They're pretty good at comparing similar things.
All right. So proficient when comparing, you know, more than one features in the multiple choice format.
Yeah, in the multiple choice format, definitely. Now, some of them a little bit in the constructed response, and most of them not so much. They, again, didn't take it to that next step.
Right.
And one of the things I saw, they were doing a pretty good job at looking at the pictures.
Okay.
When we did the political cartoons, hitting this, but when we had them looking at photographs, they were able to come through on that a little bit better.
And I think probably that just had to do with, again, prior background knowledge. They've seen photographs before, but they may not have come into contact with a lot of political cartoons.
All right. So how would we word our inference for this group? They're proficient in comparing 2 graphic features in multiple choice. They're proficient in interpreting pictures, actual photographs.
Yeah,
So
but
what can we
they're
infer?
not looking deeper in. So I think, again, with the words that are in the political cartoons, I think that means that they're just not only capable, but very proficient in looking at just the obvious signs of the graphic features. Maybe not the deeper levels.
Right, which we've seen in their reading all along.
Yeah.
So that and connections.
Performance errors and misconceptions for this group, students far to go. I noticed that, like with the political cartoons, if we're going to be very specific, it's the words. Once there's words involved, they kind of get confused.
Yeah, and I
That
don't
seems
know
to
if
throw
it's
'em off.
they're not reading the words, or they're not paying as close of attention, or connecting the words to the picture. They're just not. There's some sort of disconnect there. I noticed the same thing as well.
Okay.
And then there's the big gorilla in the room, though, constructive response.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know how to
You're
qualify
right.
with.
They're having trouble with that.
Yeah, they were
Is it
definitely
that?
struggling in constructive response, where they could make the connections and the comparisons in multiple choice, but when they were asked to write it out, then it was just, it was lost somewhere in translation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a big difference here is they don't necessarily pay attention to specific details. They struggle with the minute details.
And that goes back to trying to get that right answer very quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly, and trying to speed through it, and maybe not taking as much time as they need.
Yes, I think so. And that goes back to, you know, our inference from before. They're proficient in the obvious. It's the not obvious. It's that below the surface thinking.
It's the inference is reading in between the lines.
Exactly, which is what we've been working on all along.
Yeah.
All right, so intervention. I had 3. Hal, I know you had 3. Judy, you had 1. These were good with the obvious. That's a strength, is the obvious. Able to identify the obvious features. You know, with, let's see. If I look at one of mine, all right, in number 3, that's a good example with the, no, question number 3,
Okay.
photograph number 2, with the different water fountains. They're able to understand that the time, in this time period, and the fact that the data's in the caption, that helps, so they are connecting those 2 pieces. They're able to understand that this shows, letter B, to emphasize the 1950s common belief that the white race was superior to all others. But again, that one is very obvious. This water fountain is obviously
Very obvious.
much better than the other, you know, different levels and whatnot.
think they've probably seen that stuff like that before too.
I think you're right, so that gives back that background knowledge too.
With my student, and I'm not sure, how did your students do on photo number 4 in this? Because again, I only have one student, but these were the only 2 questions she got right on the whole
Oh,
test.
wow, did well with 8. A majority of my kids missed number 9 altogether.
Yeah, a majority of mine did too, and you can see she circled desegregated schools and then circling integrated schools. So she, at first, you can kind of see that thinking because she crossed it out.
Right,
So,
right, but yeah, most of mine missed number 9. But even my intervention kids were able to understand number 8, the size of the door versus the size of the student. So I thought that was pretty good.
those are pretty obvious connections
Right.
as well.
Right. Able to deal with the obvious. And then also with the compare and contrast in multiple choice format, they did well.
Yeah, just
Did
like
you
the
notice that?
Florida students, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I think they're asked to do that quite a bit in school. So I
think
think
you're right.
that might play a role in it as well. They're not so much asked to do a constructive response all the time.
Right.
And when they are, they're unaware of how to just break it down.
I think you're right. All right, so errors and misconceptions.
They're kind of the flip side, those proficient kids that taking it off the page and putting it into the real world
Right.
was a problem.
Right, so it's the exact opposite of our proficient students. So there's real world connections.
And
What else?
even you could say the symbolic meanings and things too.
I think you're right. So what could our inference be based on that?
Just that they're not making connections between the information they see here and anything else. I mean, even comparing within the test or to their own lives or to the world. They're just not, there's some sort of disconnect between the information they're seeing on the test and they feel as though it's, I don't know if they feel this, but they seem to feel as though it's just an isolated incident. It has no relation to anything else and they're just not making those connections.
I'll go with that, yeah.
Okay. All right. Step 3 is our SMART goal, and I went ahead and crunched the numbers for us based on what we submitted into the Dropbox, and we can double check the math and make sure this is what we want to use. The percentage of English 1 students scoring proficient or higher in analyzing graphic information will increase from 17%, which is what it is now, to 89%. And I know I have lost a week, right here in the cycle, I've lost a week of instruction. So are we okay with pushing it back to the end of March?
I
Right
think
before
that
spring break?
I think that would be ideal, just to make sure that we really cover it and that they're actually learning it.
Right, and they have a chance for mastery.
If we're going for 89% extra time.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Be good for me.
So we're looking at the post-test. We can say around March 25th, and that gives us a few days before spring break to play with.
Mhm.
So the
And then
week
we get
of
it in
March
before
25th?
The end of third quarter.
I think so too.